Welcome in, everybody, to another, I guess, month of XFL Weekly. I'm your host, Kyle Krajewski, joined by, again, lovely as always, Zach Cole. It's been about a month since we last recorded. The championship is over a month ago, I should say. And we just had an XFL rookie draft. But before we get into all that, Zach, what's up, man? How have you been?
I've been good, brother. I can't complain too awful much. I'm excited to talk about the limited XFL news we have, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think our plan here as the XFL offseason went on was to kind of keep I guess distance out the show. So instead of weekly, we're monthly, and even just this past month, I mean, we had the XFL draft, but it still feels like news and excitement is sparse. I mean, I'm still pumped about the XFL, um, but it's been a month, and I feel like it's weird to say like we only have the XFL draft really to discuss, but here we are. Hopefully, we'll have a bunch of signings to go through as NFL training camp goes through and makes its way through. Um, but yeah, XFL draft, which took place. Let's see, we're recording this on the 20th, and the draft was, oh, I should have had an exact date. Oh, 4 days ago on the 16th. And it was all teams basically drafted 10 players, or I guess they drafted them and basically drafted, I'll put in air quotes, the rights to that player. And that is the XFL draft. Qualifications or eligibility for players to have been drafted must have been eligible for the 2023 NFL draft. So if they were eligible, whether they, uh, I guess, deemed themselves registered or whatever for the NFL draft, they had to be eligible for the NFL draft. Currently not under contract of any other pro team. And that includes, I mean, we saw there were a few, I guess, players who were on undrafted rookie contracts for the NFL, but were released, kind of those floaters. But they were, some of them were drafted, and then drafted rookies who were drafted into this XFL draft. They get an NFL out up until December 26th of 2023. So that's following week 16 of the NFL. Basically, if they get an NFL contract, basically up until then, or maybe they get one and fall off, they get to basically say, nope, I'm sticking with the NFL. I've got this contract. Or they can basically say, nope, NFL, or I'll take the chance with the XFL, have a good season there, and kind of make my way back. So they get that NFL out, is what they're calling it, by the end of the year to basically say, or get an NFL chance and then decide if they want to go back or stick with the XFL.
Yeah, and Kyle, I think that the really cool thing about this XFL draft is that we got to see a lot of representation from a lot of different schools. I know that you're going to get into some of the specifics of some of the guys we saw move and stuff, but just to name a couple of the colleges, I mean, Davenport College is in here. South Alabama, Incarnate Word had a couple guys drafted, which is a religious school out of Texas. I mean, Western Kentucky, UAB. Grand Valley State. I'm not going to name them all off, but I mean, there were just some crazy schools that had guys featured in this XFL draft, rookie draft, which is pretty cool to see that there's such a wide dispersion of talent and that they're looking in all these different areas to try to find these players. I mean, it's really easy to just take a look at Bama and take a look at Clemson and take a look at Auburn and just, take those best players from those best schools. But for them to be digging and looking at this next level really kind of shows you that there's a lot of guys that get a shot in the XFL. And, this can be a stepping stone that they don't necessarily get from the regular NFL draft. And we get to see them put it into action here through this rookie draft. So I think that that's kind of a pretty cool point to talk about.
Yeah, and something else I saw is that there were just two players drafted. I think two is the exact number. Yes, two players who were drafted that attended the NFL Combine. So,
Wow.
I mean, that's two out of four, or not 40. I think that's 80 players. Two out of 80 who didn't have that extra chance to showcase their skills at the combine, and now they get potentially a whole XFL season to really showcase. And you mentioned the colleges that you kind of listed a few that, not to say that they're out there, but they're not getting primetime games on ESPN.
Right.
They just, and that's kind of the beauty of the XFL is these players all get that extra 8 games or even just 2 games to add on to their resume or onto their tape to basically showcase to NFL scouts and just another chance to showcase their abilities. And that's awesome. Yeah, it's cool to see these much smaller schools kind of make their way into this XFL draft.
Yeah, and another thing to mention, Kyle, is that as I'm looking through the list of guys that were drafted, obviously there's still a fair share of receivers and running backs and quarterbacks. But I mean, as I look through this, there's a ton of offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebackers, and defensive backs that got selected in this draft, which is kind of cool because sometimes those are the guys that don't get a chance because of their size or their speed or something that might hold them back from the viewpoint of NFL scouts or NFL front offices. So to see all these guys getting picked that, again, because they went to a smaller school or because they're maybe a little undersized or a little slower, it just, like you mentioned, they need to get some tape and they need to get some playing time in. And this is the perfect way for them to do that.
Absolutely. And then we're not going to sit here and go through each single pick of the XFL draft just because, I mean, you, the listener, I could list all 80 and you'd probably fall asleep. Not to say it's not exciting, but because listing 80 names is not the best. I think we even went through the players who went through the NFL signings and it was like, I can list all these guys, but that's not entertaining. That's not interesting, but I'll put links to kind of the whole draft board and what that looked like in the show descriptions or the video descriptions. That way you can kind of go through and sort it out yourself. But we were just going to kind of run through basically some standouts, some highlights that Zach and I saw. But before we kind of truly dive in, there was a trade before the draft, Zach. A little fun Renegades and Sea Dragons pre-draft trade. Seattle got, or I guess Seattle received offensive tackle George Moore in the 40th overall pick, while Arlington got linebacker Tazar Skipper and the 46th overall pick. So a little bit of a pick swap and some player movement, which is
It's funny, Kyle. I mean, this feels on brand for both teams after just one season. We see Seattle's trying to bolster up their offensive line, keep DiNucci a little bit more protected, and Arlington is tacking on more defense like only they know how to do. So it was kind of cool to see them just pick up some pieces that kind of play to their team's strengths.
Yeah, and it's really funny too. I actually think the two directors of player personnel are like between the two teams are brothers. I saw that and I completely meant to write that down for this. So they probably had like a I don't know, like a family dinner, and we're just like, all right, I want this guy and this guy. What's it gonna take?
They just hit each other up in the group chat, right?
I saw that number or I saw that listed somewhere and now I can't even find it. So I almost feel like a liar saying that. But so take that with a mini grain of salt. But I could have sworn they're brothers. But if not, take that as a random fun fact. That's not true. And then going into the draft, Zach, I'll let you say the other tidbit. But the one that I saw was that the Defenders drafted 3 wide receivers. And I personally, I mean, they drafted 3, and then I think 2 other teams drafted 2. Like they were the team that drafted the most wide receivers. And I think I should have had this written down. Yeah, the Renegades took 2.
I was gonna say Arlington has 2 here as I'm looking at it.
The Defenders took 2.
Have 3. Yep.
And the Battlehawks took 2. So the Defenders went into this draft saying, we're gonna have they had a spectacular offense this season. So going into this draft and kind of seeing wide receivers as a need was interesting, but I guess they really expect. I mean, I think Chris Blair signed with the Vikings. Maybe they expect the other two to also skip town, or just adding depth to that I guess receiver room. But I thought that was an interesting call out. I guess specifically they drafted wide receivers CJ Johnson, CJ Johnson out of East Carolina, Ty Scott out of Missouri State, and Trey Shropshire out of UAB. Again, thought it was interesting considering they had a great wide receiver room, but it's very possible that all three find themselves in the NFL this season.
Yeah, it definitely is interesting. And I think you brought up a really good point in there, Kyle, is that year in and year out with the XFL being sort of like a what do we say, a miniature league of the NFL, or like a trial league of the NFL. I don't want to use a minor league. That's not what we were looking for. We established this once before, and I don't remember what we called it.
Yeah, what did we call it?
Whatever the case, you always have to kind of expect that you want your players to move up and move on, and that almost provides an interesting level to it, where being competitive is challenging, because if you have great players, they're going to leave, and that's the goal. You want them to go up and continue getting higher up, praise and looks. So it's just it's difficult. And you mentioned that maybe guys like Chris Blair and Lucky Jackson are getting looks in the NFL and could potentially move on, which is why DC needs to prepare themselves for the worst or the best, essentially.
Yeah, it's interesting to say losing players is a positive,
Right.
but if anything, it just means they were that good for your team this past season.
Definitely. Yeah, and two other things to point out from this draft, Kyle, is that two quarterbacks were taken in this draft. Connor Degenhart, not sure how we're going to say that one. We'd have to do some research on that. From New Haven, went to the Arlington Renegades, and the Houston Roughnecks also took a quarterback, Lindsey Scott Jr. from Incarnate Word, which is interesting. I think for the Arlington aspect of that, we saw them pick up Luis Perez halfway through the season, and he carried them to a championship. So, I mean, that's awesome. And I guess maybe this is a little bit of a depth move, just adding on a guy that can help bolster up that quarterback room. And as far as Houston goes, I mean, we never saw them really be the same after Silvers went down and got roughed up a little bit this season. Cole McDonald hopped in there and wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire. So for them to draft a quarterback, who knows? Maybe it's a new start, a new page in the book at the quarterback position for them. So I guess it's yet to be seen what could happen for both of these teams. But my speculation is that Arlington's a depth piece, and Houston could potentially compete to start.
Yeah, Houston, that's a great way to put it. Houston kind of finds their way, maybe not in desperate need, but certainly behind in the QB room. And it's so interesting to think that we still have 8 months, or technically 6 months until camp begins, and then about 8 until the season starts again. So who knows? Maybe there's another few NFL floaters who find their way into the XFL, like a Danucci or AJ McCarron, and that's most certainly going to happen. But it's still kind of cool to see these two QBs basically kind of already make their way into the XFL.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a new beginning for these guys. Who's to say what could happen? I mean, we saw there was a lot of uncertainty in the quarterback position in the XFL this year, so lots can happen
for sure. And then another neat little tidbit: 17 players who were drafted in this XFL draft originally signed with NFL teams or were previously signed. Just kind of as undrafted free agents. So they didn't make it into the NFL draft, but had their made their way into OTAs or just rookie mini camps and showcase some skill to get a undrafted free agent signing or contract. But of course, one of the qualifications is he can't be on a contract with another pro team. So things might have fallen off. Things might have I guess, fallen apart for them, but kind of getting another shot here in the XFL, and with still that potential to do so moving forward.
Yeah, it's awesome that this is an extra open door for players now too, because so many times, think of like all the times when we watch Hard Knocks, and there's that guy that you just cheer for, and he ends up getting cut before the the mini camp is over or whatever. And this could be a similar situation. I mean, obviously we don't have Hard Knocks now to see what these rookies are going through, but I like to think it's probably something similar where these are guys that are grinding, they're out there working every day, and the contract just didn't happen this time, and they got to go out and, like we've mentioned before, they got to go out and get more tape. So this is the perfect opportunity for them to do so in signing with an XFL team where they can hopefully see the field a little bit more frequently than they would in the NFL.
For sure, for sure. All right, Zach. Personally, I don't have any other specific standouts. I'm sure within the next month I'll have others. Do you have anything before we kind of step away from the draft that you wanted to touch on?
Not particularly. Nope. I think it was just, I want to reiterate how cool it was to see all these different teams get guys drafted. I mean, if you have a couple minutes, click on that link that Kyle's going to put down in the description and look at the recap of the draft. It was just kind of cool to see all these different names from all these different places. So hoping for the best. I can't wait to see how it plays out this year.
Yeah, super excited. And then basically, if players weren't drafted, there's still a chance to kind of make their way into the XFL. As throughout the rest of the summer, there are showcases that you can, or I guess players can register for to kind of show up and show off their skills to XFL scouts. Previously, there's already been 2 as of this recording. There was the HBCU showcase and Atlanta. And then there's 4 more throughout, I guess, until mid-July. So I kind of before next recording. St. Louis, Washington, Houston, and Arizona. Those showcases take place on St. Louis is on July 7th. DC is July 9th. Houston's July 14th. And then Arizona has one July 16th. So those are like kind of open registration. And then the XFL is hosting an XFL Combine. Tuesday through Thursday, July 25th to 27th, inviting basically standouts of the showcases. So it's kind of like you show up to the showcase, showcase your abilities, and then if you balled out, if the scouts kind of liked you enough, make your way into the XFL Combine, and pretty much just more ways to show off your potential, or as if I'm speaking to those players, but more ways for players to kind of show off their football abilities, and basically find another path into professional football.
I think that's a really cool underlying thing about this, Kyle, is that there are so many paths to get into the XFL, and it's to just provide yourself with a stepping stone to launch hopefully a career, in either the XFL or springboarding into the NFL. So this is just a way that the XFL kind of goes above and beyond to try to find all the talent that's out there and get all that talent on board. And through these showcases, hopefully they'll be able to find a good amount.
Yeah, and I also think it's really cool that that the XFL has the rookie draft, and then they have the showcases and the combine. And I think that's because the showcases and combines aren't just for rookies. If you are kind of that first year out of football, basically if you aren't eligible for the NFL draft, kind of an extra chance to show off, say you're still interested in professional football, and just kind of make your way. You said it, make a career in professional football.
Yeah, and I wonder if this will be the spot where maybe not this year, but down the road, we see guys just to throw out a name like Destroying, guys that are still very much in love with football, still have a knack for football and want to be around it, and maybe want to go out and prove that they belong in a professional level of some sort. And this is the opportunity for them to do so. I mean, there's a handful of guys that come to mind when I'm talking about that sort of player, but just to kind of put a face to the name and just a sort of general concept of the player I'm talking about, like a destroying, a guy that is supposed to have the NFL talent and that next level ability. This feels like hopefully a way that guys like that can get involved in professional football.
Yeah, guys who have the ability, but haven't potentially had that outlet for showcasing in probably maybe like a few years, or I mean, if ever. But
Right.
it's really cool, just awesome to just to see it.
Absolutely.
And then let's see. I think that's pretty much it.
I think that's just about everything we had to cover. I mean, this is kind of the dead time right now. There's not a ton going on. We're in between both seasons at this point, and there's just, we're getting through right now.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll have more to discuss in a month. I believe there are. I don't think it's officially been announced. I could be wrong and could be missing headlines. But I believe there's still an XFL draft coming up after these showcases, after the combines. I think it was like a rookie draft, get the rookies in, and then that way it's not a free for all post combine. I think there's going to be that fall or late summer XFL draft, basically choosing from combine players or maybe outsiders. But that's to come. We'll obviously have more information as the weeks and the months go on. But for now, that was it for XFL Weekly / technically monthly. You can catch our next show kind of potentially the week of July 19th. It may be pushed back a week depending on if there's something going on that week. And it's like, oh, we can cover that the following week. But we'll keep you posted. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at XFL_weekly. And we'll keep you posted on when that next episode's coming out. Or just follow, subscribe, and you'll get notified when that takes place. That way you can kind of keep it suspenseful and be like, oh, this Wednesday is when it came out. Cool. Either way, look for that within the next month. But in the meantime, Zach and I do some fantasy football, I guess, just enjoyment. In the meantime, check us out there at First Seed Fantasy. You can find that basically how you're watching us or listening to us now, whether it's podcast or YouTube. Just search First Seed Fantasy and you can find us. Basically doing the same thing, just instead of XFL, it's fantasy football. And same thing. Podcast coming out weekly now that it's basically fantasy football season. We've kind of shifted our majority of our energy there, and that's why XFL monthly is its thing. So, Zach, it was a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in a month.
Until the next one.
See you.